We should start this section by acknowledging NIST's own conclusions on why the towers fell. Most people don't realize this was NIST's final conclusion. The inward bowing theory and the pancake collapse theories were guesses as to what could have happened. Yet there are people that cling to these theories like they are scientific law. The explanation of the inward bowing theory constantly changes. First it was melted steel, then melted girders, then melted bolts, then collapsed floors, etc. We will focus on what seems to be the most adhered to version of late. The theory states hot pockets of fire caused the floors connecting the two support structures to lose half their strength and begin to bow downward. As the floor bowed, it pulled the side of the outer columns inward, causing the outer box to lose structural integrity. So basically, the floors pulled the box frame inward and caused it to fail. Strangely, the cartoon also shows the core bowing inward, which is impossible, but that's the theory. Let's take a look at it in action. The bowing occurs, and the collapse is initiated. Next, the building collapses and breaks several laws of motion. The building is not pancaking, it's pulverizing. But either way, both pancaking and pulverizing are physically impossible from a natural collapse. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Scientists use this law for gravity and rockets, but it applies to all motion and the forces they exhibit. Everyone agrees that the towers were largely pulverized into dust and small debris. When pulverization is the outcome of the event, it changes the physics drastically compared to other building collapses. Most investigators focus on the speed the buildings fell and overlook the final outcome. Pulverization indicates a huge amount of force, a pulverizing force. It also means you have to account for Newton's third law of motion. When we apply this to the World Trade Center, in layman's terms, it means a small mass cannot completely crush a large mass. There's not enough potential energy in the smaller mass to generate enough force. During the collapse, both pieces are the same structure and composition. The force applied is the same on both sections. Let's have a look. Here are both sections of the building at the time of collapse. If 10 floors on the bottom are pulverized, then 10 floors on the top must also be pulverized. The same amount of force used to pulverize the bottom must also be applied to the top, pulverizing it. And so on until the smaller mass runs out of energy. There should have been this much of the building left, or a type of collapse that did not involve pulverization. Now one might think the force of the top pulverizing triggered a pancake collapse on the floors below. This is still impossible. Say this floor collapsed, pulverizing itself, causing the next floor to collapse, pulverizing itself, and so on down the building. Do you recognize how Newton's third law makes this impossible? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If the force pulverizes the top floor, the bottom floor must experience the same reaction. Earlier, we learned the floors were independently supported and only bore their own weight. This massive force means that if the upper floor is pulverized, then the lower floor must also be pulverized. When both floors pulverize, there's no more energy for the pancake collapse to continue. You can pancake something or you can pulverize something, but it's physically impossible to do both at the same time. The Twin Towers became the first and second self-pulverizing objects in history. So we've now learned that a natural collapse is in violation of two laws of motion. If your conclusion doesn't adhere to the laws of physics, it's false. It is physically impossible for a pancake collapse or a direct weight implosion to have crushed the World Trade Center. The pancake collapse theory was originally introduced by FEMA. Popular mechanics has gone on to use this theory ever since, even after members of NIST admitted it was impossible. Popular mechanics didn't debunk controlled demolition, they debunked Isaac Newton. When a scientific publication begins debunking the laws of physics, they have lost all credibility. There is a very distinct difference in science between laws and theories. Now, let's move on.